Welcome back, everybody, to yet another episode of Entertainment Evolved. This is the finale for Season 6, 24 episodes. And we are going to end it, sir, as we began. You and I, right here, we opened this season talking about some protagonists, and we are going to close it out talking about some antagonists. Ace, welcome back from the superhero homies, my friend.
To quote a very famous villain, I feel like you and I are destined to do this dance forever.
That's true. That's true. And, to quote, well, I don't know if he's a villain, but he's definitely a bit of an antagonist. You know, time is a flat circle, you see. And so, before we get into it tonight, because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I do think that this is very timely. Finally, I have it right here. I'm not going to leave it standing up because it's not going to stand. But, you know, as always, I'm going to put some close-ups in of it. We have right here, this is the slipcase digital deluxe edition of none other than White Sand, which is Brandon Sanderson graphic novel. One of two, actually. So there is another. So there is another. It's called Dark One, but it's not It's not in the same universe, though. It's kind of its own thing.
Gotcha.
But that may be something that we need to visit at some point. So
yeah, I think we may. I restarted White Sand. I started it like forever ago when you first gave it to me.
Yeah,
and I was super into it. I got distracted by like the 17 other things that I needed to read, and then I recently went back to it like when yours finally arrived, like 18 years later.
Yeah,
and man, it is such a dense read in all the best ways possible.
I figured it would be something that you would really be able to sink your teeth into.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I knew it'd be something for me to sink my teeth into because it has a glossary in the beginning of the book.
Which is fitting.
All right. And I'm grateful for it because I found myself going back there to the glossary, you know, just for like reference point. Okay, now what's this mean again?
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's been a lot of fun so far.
And Chrysala, who's one of the main characters in the book, that's kind of what she does. She documents things. She's a researcher.
It's written in her handwriting, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, there is that in all of the Cosmere books.
Oh.
At the end, there'll be like an explanation of the magic system of that world and everything, and then it's all from her perspective and her point of view. And then there's the Arcanum Unbound, which is basically all written from her perspective, and it's like kind of her I guess logbook of like all the different worlds and like how dangerous it is to go there, kind of like like a traveler's guide to the Cosmere type deal. So if you haven't been paying attention, this is White Sand is Brandon Sanderson graphic novel in the Cosmere. This is the omnibus edition. It just came out. And if you haven't been paying attention over on Superhero Homies, now is the time. There's plenty of back episodes for you to listen to. Mm-hmm. But very soon, as soon as we both finish it, we are both going to be reviewing it over there, and I'm really excited about it. So
yeah, I'm super looking forward to that, and it's going to be really exciting. Honestly, I think more exciting for me, maybe even than you. This is my first time delving into the Cosmere. And this is also going to be an opportunity for me on my own podcast to sit back and be like, all right, so Caleb, tell me, what does this mean?
Yeah, which I will be able to do
right
without looking. This is going to be, I think we have the perfect set of perspectives to do this.
Yes.
Because it is, at the time that I read it, it'll be the only thing that I haven't read in the Cosmere, which if you haven't been keeping up, that is the kind of one of the shared universes where all these different things take place, so it'll be the last thing I read in the Cosmere. I'll have read everything else, and it'll be the first thing that you read, and so we will have probably two completely different perspectives on it, and I'm just so excited for it.
Me too.
Almost excited as excited as I was for this episode today. We are talking about the Antagonist, and something when I was planning for this episode, something I thought about here is, you know, we started the season off with the Protagonist episode, and I would encourage anyone who is, if you haven't listened to or watched that, I think maybe we were just still on audio then.
Yeah.
24 episodes
we were.
ago. So you can't watch it, and you know, listen to it. We were still audio only back then. I would encourage you to do that because at least one of mine has some direct parallels to one of the characters I talked about there. But it's also a great episode. It's been slowly climbing up the charts. It is actually the third most listened to episode of the podcast right now. And both of the ones that are above it are Dark Side of the Ring episodes from way back when.
Right.
So like, for it to have gained that much traction in the very short amount of time that it's been, I think, it's going to end up being one of our most popular episodes.
Oh, I wish you didn't tell me that because now the pressure's on.
The pressure is on. I was so when I was preparing for this, I thought about it, and the word antagonist, I think, is more closely associated to the word villain.
It is.
Than the word protagonist is associated to the word hero.
Right.
Because and I thought that was really interesting because your antagonist is almost always going to be a villain, at least in the eyes of the protagonist.
Yes.
Whereas the protagonist is, I would say, most of the time they are a hero in our eyes and not theirs, or the other way around.
Or the other way around, right.
And rarely is it both.
And, it's interesting because, I said this at risk of hopefully not stepping on anyone's toes here tonight, but you look at, like, Breaking Bad. It's one of my favorite. It is my favorite show of all time. I mean, you have Walt, who is technically, he is a protagonist, one of two main protagonists of the show. And then at one point, his brother-in-law, Hank, is an active antagonist. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen Breaking Bad.
Right. Yeah, right. And Hank is very much a hero.
Right.
In every sense of the word.
Yeah.
And yet, you do not want him to catch Walt. I'm trying not to look over there at it, but I'm gonna.
I knew it. Because he was looking right at me.
Yeah, he is looking right at you. He's like, motherfucker, why haven't you watched me yet? And that is such an interesting thing because, like, Breaking Bad's probably my number 2 of all time, with only The Shield being first. And I think it's very interesting, and it may say a lot about me that both of those shows share that, where the main character is not a hero in any sense of the word, really. And not really a good person, and I think that but they are capable of doing good things, and I think that's an important thing to show is that a good person is capable of doing bad things, and vice versa. A bad person is capable of doing good things, and I think that both of those shows really demonstrate that on just a level that there's no way I could put it to script like that. I think it's masterful. So
always impressive when they can do something like that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So I thought that was interesting, but also we have today, a couple of different things that we want to talk about, some specific areas in regards to Antagonist. Why is it that Antagonist is so important, like, for you?
For me, especially like having a really dense comic book background, the best superheroes have a phenomenal rogue gallery.
Right.
And even in terms of like superhero movies, a lot of the best superhero movies have phenomenal villains. And the antagonist serves more than just standing in the way, being a roadblock for the protagonist.
Right.
A good
great one. Anyway.
Yeah, right. A good one or a great one. But really what a great antagonist should do is have their own motives also and their own goals. And maybe they're just at an intersection with the protagonist. So like they don't have to be mirror images of each other. They don't have to be like the same, or they could be. But they need to have their own characteristics, their own plot lines, their own motives, and they need to be fully fleshed out characters. And really, that's what's most important.
Right. Is that they need to be believable as a character.
Yes.
And I think oftentimes it's usually better when they're simply at odds with the hero, and maybe even or the protagonist, and maybe even they don't want to be. For instance. One of the things like Batman the Joker is obviously such a good, go-to for all of this stuff, whereas it's just like, the Joker, we talk about like, we're going to be doing the Dark Knight trilogy soon. he has that perfect quote in that movie. He's like, "Kill you? I don't want to kill you. You're too
Right.
much fun." Like the Joker didn't necessarily seek out to have this conflict with Batman, but once he found out how fun it was, that's all he can think about. Whereas, like, Batman's mission has nothing to do with that. He's trying to protect Gotham.
Yeah.
and it's just like you can always tell that those two characters are on their own paths and they just have intersected, and now that's all that can happen. And you brought up Walt and Hank. And that's such a good one, too. Like, Hank doesn't bear any ill will towards Walt. He's doing his job.
Yeah.
Now, after he, spoilers for Breaking Bad, but, like, after he gets all shot up and everything, he probably has a little ill will.
Yeah.
And finds out Walt's been lying to him all this time, but...
Yeah, and been a meth kingpin on top of lying.
Yeah, on top of all of that. But there was no ill will, I think, between the two parties originally.
Right.
It just, they evolved to this point where they met at a crossroads. And you've got the whole, unstoppable force and movable object. Like, somebody has got to go.
Yeah.
So, and that's how it went.
That is exactly how it
went. Breaking Bad's such a great show.
It is. It is.
And just such a good example of a lot of the things that we're going to discuss here. So, I brought up, we had 3 kind of pillars of, like, what makes a great protagonist. And I came up with 3 for a great antagonist. And here they are. Mm-hmm. Number 1, a capacity for evil or a willingness to do bad things. I thought that this was maybe when I first kind of typed this, I thought maybe it sounded too basic or too obvious. But I think it's very important. Like, this is such an important aspect of an antagonist, right? Is that they will do a thing that an average, everyday person would not imagine. Like, they wouldn't do. They wouldn't dream of it. And there are some examples of this, and once again, hope I'm not stepping on any toes here. You look at, like Killmonger, right? He comes out and he gives the whole speech at the British Museum about how, none of this is theirs anyway. They stole it all, and you're just like, well, I mean, he that is true. He did steal all that shit, and he's like, all these people are, suffering all over the world, and we can help them. And you're like, hey, man, he is making a lot of sense. And then he shoots his girlfriend, and you have to be like, oh, wait a minute,
right?
And there is an element of that where it's like the writer has to put that in, or he makes too much sense, But it's like I feel like that's such an important thing where you get to see, we see that you agree with them up to a point. I think with some of the best villains, Magneto is another good example of that. Where it's like you agree with them up to a point, and then they do something that you would never dream of doing, like that's just too far.
Yeah, and that right there, I think, is really what drives a lot of the best antagonists. Where maybe you don't even agree with them, but you can see where they're coming from.
Right.
And then they do something that is just, irreprehensible. There's no coming back from that.
Yeah.
And Killmonger, you're right, he did it. I think Thanos is another one. You look at the full breadth of Thanos, he wants there to be less suffering in the universe, and you can't kill greed of conscious creatures, but you can he can do what he did,
right?
Which is a very extreme and drastic thing to do. And then you have Magneto, a person who was pushed to the point of basically being like, you won't leave me or my people alone. If genocide is what I have to do to protect me and mine, then that's what I will do.
Right. And
the interesting thing about the antagonist, right, is that they view oftentimes what they're doing as they almost view themselves as martyrs, as making like this extreme sacrifice, even though they don't have any plans on killing themselves. They have these extreme viewpoints that are like, I will bear this burden of doing this terrible thing.
Thanos is such a great example of that, because even at one point, he says like, I'm the only one who is willing to do this. I'm the only one with the will to see this done. So it's like they look at it as if like everyone else in the universe, in Thanos' instance, should look at this problem and arrive at the same conclusion as him.
Right.
And maybe in his mind they all have. Like they're all just lying to themselves. They all know this is what needs to be done, but only he has the will to do it.
Right.
He is 100% the hero in his own eyes. And we've talked about how even in Infinity War they send him on all the elements of a hero's journey. And you're right to your point earlier. There's a reason, like, you ask somebody their top 5 MCU movies, and notwithstanding probably 2 of them that shouldn't make that cut, most of them are going to have an excellent villain in it.
Yes.
Winter Soldier,
Right.
Infinity War, Endgame, those are probably
Russo
on everybody's
movies,
Yeah, probably on everybody's top 5. Or even the first Avengers.
Yeah.
A lot of those, the A tier,
Right.
they all have that in common, that they have a fantastic villain. I think maybe the exception would be like Guardians 1.
Yeah.
True. They managed to make that a great movie without.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not to get off on a tangent, but like Guardians 1 did what was assumedly the impossible of having an ensemble movie without a build-up like Avengers had.
Right.
And have like 5 fully distinguished, fleshed out characters, more or less. There's Groot who says I am Groot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and zany off-the-wall characters. By the way,
Right.
This is a great time to mention that this coming Thursday night, we are going to go see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and you should check out the Superhero Homies, where we will be reviewing that immediately following the movie and probably be very tired.
Yes and yes.
Number 2, a complex range of emotions for our second pillar of a great antagonist. What'd you think about this one when I sent you the list?
Yeah, so you actually did not send me this.
I did not. No, I did send you this. I sent you the 3 on Messenger. That's where I copied them from.
On Messenger?
Yeah, man. We were having a conversation. I did send you these.
I will double check, but I do not remember seeing this.
Oh, it's in there.
Okay.
It's in there. Yeah.
But now that you asked the question, did I respond to this? That's not important.
Yeah,
Really?
We talked about it.
All right.
It's definitely in there.
Okay.
I promise.
I believe you.
That's amazing,
Yes.
though. Now that I've just shotgunned
Yes.
you with this, it's tremendous. So, what do you think about seeing it now?
Yeah. I think seeing it now, it makes perfect sense because with any kind of good villain, it takes more than just being like a mustache twirling, I'm doing this simply because, you know. So, like, in order to have like a really complex villain, they need to have like a full palette of emotions, because to a degree, one of the scariest things about the best villains is that you might find yourself relating to them, going back against like your Killmongers, your Magnetos, so forth and so on. And that's scary because you don't ever want to see yourself in a position where I think and feel just like they do. Like I would laugh at that, I would cry at that, I would feel these similar type of emotions. And so when you have a villain who experiences the same spectrum of emotions, it becomes a little bit scary and personal, because now you realize that, okay, in order to be like a great antagonist, you don't necessarily have to be a narcissist or a psychopath or a sociopath. You can have elements of those things, but also have that kind of human side as well.
Right.
And that makes it more real.
Right. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of like really good examples of that. I mean, we talked about, of course, the Batman Rogue Gallery, but you look at like, especially like the animated series version of like Victor Freeze,
Right?
Where you're like, oh, okay, well, like this guy actually, he's got a really tragic backstory, kind of like a hero would have, but you know, and then as the Joker says, all it takes is one bad day.
Yeah.
So that's number 2, and then for number 3 we have, and this is such an important one. And it may be my favorite, a point of view that justifies their actions.
Yes.
This character has been wronged in some way, or they see the world, or they have a certain worldview that justifies the things that they're doing, because very few of these antagonists would classify themselves as such.
Right.
And a lot of times that makes them more so, you know. Thanos, of course, would never, he would never, like, describe himself as the villain of the story. Quite the opposite.
He would say something condescending like, only in the minds of those narrow-minded would I be considered a villain.
Yeah. Only those lacking the will to do what they must. Yeah, I mean, or he would just accept it and be like, I will bear this burden.
Right.
You know?
I will be your villain if it means, blah, blah,
Yeah, some stoic philosophical nonsense. And I think that this one is really important too, because a lot of these kind of, just one and done or one dimensional villains, they kind of lack this, right? Where you're just like, I mean, you're like, I can't say this person doesn't exist because there are people in the world that are just bad.
Yeah.
But like, I think for the most part, like people that do bad things, they have some way of justifying it to themselves, unless you're just a complete sociopath, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Dex, for instance, from Daredevil. I don't know that he's really justifying any of that shit. I think he just
he just woke up a psychopath.
He's just a fucking psychopath. But like on the opposite side of that, like in Kingpin's mind, he is protecting the city and like he wants to be the one who defends the city and Daredevil is standing in his way of making the city what it could be.
I mean, it's a similar thing to like the Lex Luthor complex.
Oh, absolutely. That's such a great one.
Yeah, I mean Lex. In Lex's mind, like at least what he tells himself and outwardly tells people is, if I don't protect us from Superman, then who will? What happens when this man goes off the deep end? What happens when this or that happens?
Right.
Yeah.
But what it really is envy.
It's straight up envy.
But he justifies it to himself.
Right.
He's protecting the human race from an interloper, essentially.
Yeah, and that's how he views it, and also it's so much projection with Lex Luthor, and that's the thing I really love about him.
Yes,
he projects all of his bad qualities onto Superman, because if Lex had those powers, he would be that tyrant that he thinks Superman is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's it's a very like poignant thing that you say there, because it's like he thinks that like if Superman is heralded as this, just sort of on a pedestal, hero of humanity or whatever, that Superman will do what he would do with such power and wield it in that way. And that's so important, I think, in our world right now, because people make these same kind of projections every day.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, it definitely happens. Well, so the challenge here was to come up with someone who embodies each one of these things. And considering that you overlooked the list, I would imagine you are probably over there calculating. So would you like me to go first, or do you want to take a crack at it?
Well, I think I went first last time.
Okay, so you want me to go first?
Yeah, you can go first.
Okay, you're going to like all of these, actually. I think
Excellent.
One of them that you maybe guess, but it's not this one. So number one, a capacity for evil or a willingness to do bad things. My choice is the Mighty Asher from Spartacus.
Oh my!
I knew that one would pop you.
See, you know what? Because you gave me like a breadcrumb of a clue. You said something like you had watched it recently, and so it's been on your mind.
Yeah.
And I completely overlooked the fact that you had rewatched Spartacus.
Yeah, I'm actually in the middle of rewatching Spartacus right now. I've only got, I think, the last 2 episodes to go. I've been watching it kind of gradually over the last few weeks, and I was like, you know what? This person is just fresh in my mind.
Right.
I don't want to make the decision based off of that. I'll probably change it. But the more I thought about it, I was like, Asher just does such a good job with this one, because Asher, like, he has that relatability factor, because as we said, like, these are kind of all pillars of a great villain. So, like, a great villain really should have all of these, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we do see Asher kind of display all of them. But what really takes him over the line is number one, where this capacity for, like, malice and cruelty is, like, you look at his backstory, and, he's sold into slavery as a gladiator.
Right.
And even among the gladiators, he's considered, like, the lowest guy on the totem pole. Mm-hmm. And it's like, this is somebody that we ought to root for.
Exactly.
But he's just such a shit.
Right.
And early on, we see that he's willing to do just about anything in order to gain favor with those above him and try to, like, rise up to a higher station. And this often involves, like, people getting either murdered or raped or both.
Right.
And there's just no depths that he's not willing to go to. And the characters around him very quickly find out the lengths he's willing to go to in order to have that ambition. One of the earliest things that we see him do, kind of the moment, I think, if you were watching the show as it came out, in televised order, the moment where we realized that, oh, fuck, this guy is maybe a worse threat than the Romans, is he screws over another one of the slaves, Barca.
Yes.
And it's because he owes him money because he placed a bet,
right?
And Asher doesn't have the money to pay his winnings out. So as a result, he spins this tale to their master and ends up getting Barca killed as a result. So that now he doesn't have to pay him.
Yeah.
And I think that was the moment where we were all just like, holy shit, man.
Right.
And then, we go into the prequel series in the Gods of the Arena, and he comes in with another one of his fellow countrymen. I can't remember where he's actually from. Mm-hmm. Is he? No, I can't. No, he's.
Man, it's been like 4 years since I've last watched.
I could think about it if I wasn't trying to think about it.
If you weren't trying to think
about it, it would come to me immediately. Because they meet a guy later on that's from the same place. He's not Persian, is he? Is he Persian?
That's going to bother me now.
Yeah, it's going to bother me now. I'm going to have to go look after this. But anyway, so he comes in with one of his fellow countrymen, Dagon, and the whole time that they're like going back and forth, like Dagon doesn't speak Roman or Latin, actually.
Right, yeah.
So it's English in the show.
Not to confuse anyone.
So he's translating for him, and we see him kind of start to mistranslate things on purpose to kind of, put himself in higher favor than his buddy, who's clearly a better gladiator than him.
Yeah.
And he ends up getting him killed. He ends up basically turning on him in the final fight there, and killing him. Later on in the show, we see him sink to the depths of working for Glaber, who he should hate, and he basically puts together a team of gladiators to hunt down his brothers, other members of the Brotherhood.
Oh, it was so good. I mean, so vile but good.
Right, yeah. And then even Lucretia, who is another antagonist that we shouldn't like, he ends up like tormenting her, ends up raping her at some point in the episode. I mean, throughout the series, and it's just like there is no depth that this dude will not sink to.
Right, and it's like he keeps on digging. He never really finds a bottom. Like he never reaches that point where he's like, I can't do that.
No.
Yeah.
We never even see him struggle with it.
No.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like without question.
Yeah.
Yeah. He'll do it, and I mean, and like the kind of like the shitty thing is that type of society, just the nature of living back then, would almost organically reward people like that.
Right.
I mean that's probably like one of the last times where like survival of the fittest really rang true, like those type of societies. And Asher he embodied every vile thing that would help you get ahead in that society.
Yeah, I mean, like he's absolutely the worst kid in Lord of the Flies. Like, just straight up, he. One of the things that I think is so interesting about him is, we were talking about this earlier. You can see where he's coming from.
Yes.
To an extent where you're like, well, if I was in that situation, I would probably do just about anything to get ahead as well. And then you're like, well, but not that. And then it just gets worse. And it's like, and definitely not that. And definitely not that,
Well, I mean, to me, like, at the end of the day, he always embodied the phrase, how's it go, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right.
I mean, that to me, that's him, because like the more power he got, the more corrupt he got somehow. Or maybe just the more power he got, the more corruption we're able to see from him.
Right.
Like that absolute bottom of corruption was always in this guy.
Yeah. And I think, like his death at the hands of Navia, who out of all of these people, like suffered the worst, I think, from him. It was such a great moment in that show, and I think that they really so I'm just gonna spoilers for a really old TV show at this point. He dies at the end of the technically the second season, and so that last season you really feel his absence. They really had to like dig deep with their villains and get like Marcus Crassus and Caesar and really like do a lot for them, because one of the things we talked about like kind of off mic before is how a lot of these seasons will kill off these shows will kill off their like great villains, and then like in the last season they just try to introduce new ones and it doesn't work. Spartacus is one of those very few instances, it may be the only one I can think of, where that actually really did work very well because they just masterfully pulled it off. But I think even then, you feel Asher's absence.
Yeah.
Because in that last season, it's really the slaves versus the Romans, whereas
Right.
Asher always kind of had that third element
Yes.
in the mix that kind of made everything chaos.
Right. And that is true because I remember, not to go off on like a Spartacus tangent, but I remember watching that show like for the first time, and like I just loved season one. And then unfortunately with Andy Whitfield, was
Yeah.
it? Yeah. With his unfortunate passing, I was like, well, that's going to put a damper on things. And then we got news they were doing a season two. All right, well, and it was not going to be set in that current period. All right. And I didn't have a lot of high expectations just because of the circumstances. But what we got, I thought was incredible.
Gods of the Arena is amazing.
Yeah.
It may be my favorite part of the show.
It might be actually because it's hard for me to say right now because I just enjoyed it so much more than I thought I would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think them adding Gannicus does a lot for.
It does.
He's such a good character.
Yeah.
So that's my number one.
That's a good one, man.
I never wavered on it. Now I actually picked all three of these the day that I sent you this list, or didn't.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
and I have never changed any of them. So.
I 100% believe you sent me the list. I 100% also believe that I just overlooked that shit completely.
It happens.
Yeah. So number one, thankfully, with the ones I picked, I do have one for all of these, and thank goodness. And so they are kind of like a revolving list that can kind of fit any of these. But I think the one that I have on my list that fits the most. Go ahead and get them pulled up here. Yeah. This one right here. Okay. So the character that I had in mind for this. This is actually a video game character.
Okay.
Yeah. And because, I think that video games have some great characters altogether. I don't know how much we've actually spoke about like this in particular, but I have a sincere love of Rockstar, the game studios. I love their games. I've played them all. And, everything from Grand Theft Auto, obviously, to Red Dead, which is my favorite.
I was gonna say you picked a Red Dead character in the first in the protagonist episode.
I did. I picked John Marston for the protagonist. I was very tempted to choose Dutch Vanderlyn for the villain here, but I didn't want to do that mirror image.
Right.
It'd be too close to home. But instead, I did pick a villain from one of my other favorite Rockstar games that does not get nearly enough attention. Not Manhunt, not L.A. Noire. I'm talking about Bully.
I knew as soon as you said that doesn't get enough credit, I was like, Bully.
Yes. Have you ever played Bully?
I have. I have not beat it, but I have played it a bit.
Yeah. I absolutely love this game. Bully came out back in like October of 2006. All right. So just to put you guys in that mind frame, that means that I had just graduated high school. And so I was a pretty good demographic for this game at the time. But the antagonist here that I chose is the main antagonist for the game. His name is Gary Smith, and he's a real piece of shit, Morty.
It sounds like a real piece of shit.
Yeah. So just a quick synopsis for those of you who have not played this 17-year-old game. Jesus Christ. But
I see a few gray hairs.
Right. But Bully, you play as a 15-year-old kid named Jimmy Hopkins. His mother just married this rich dirtbag, and his stepdad and his mother treat Jimmy like shit. You get that from like the first minute intro of the game. And they're going on their honeymoon, and don't know how long the honeymoon is, but they ship Jimmy off to this boarding school up in like New England called Bullsworth Academy. And so the entire game takes place within the small section of the city and on this campus called Bullsworth Academy. And Jimmy was the protagonist that you play as. He's a very rough around the edges guy. He actually has a lot of growth throughout the game, which is very cool to see. And and there's like your different sects of people. Like there's the nerd group, there's the jock group, the greasers, so forth and so on. But one of the first characters who you meet is this character named Gary, and Gary walks up and he introduces himself, and right off the bat, he rubs Jimmy the wrong way, but the way that Gary works here is that he's very manipulative right from the start, and throughout the course of the game, he's poking and prodding at Jimmy, and in the beginning of the game, you think that maybe this guy's just a dickhead, but maybe he's not so bad around the edges, or once you get to know him, he is close like close to like the end of the first act of the game, I believe. Is when Gary shows more of his true colors, and he turns on you, and he tries to paint you out to be this. Well, he basically tries to turn all of the groups against you. And throughout the course of the game, from other people who you encounter in the game and whatnot, you learn that Gary is, I mean, by his own admission, he's a kind of a narcissist. He's got a few psychopathic tendencies, and he's very much a manipulative dickbag. And the things that he does throughout this game, he tells vicious lies and manipulates people because, I mean, at the end of the day, they're all kids, but he is kind of like the worst kind of person here. And keep in mind, there's a lot of bad people here, but Gary's the worst. And the things that Gary does to people, whether it is beating down the little guy just because he wants to feel powerful, or whether it's telling lies to other students because he doesn't like Jimmy, the protagonist, and he wants to get them against you. And the thing that makes this so compelling as a video game is that when I first played Bully, I was like, okay, this isn't going to be, definitely won't be like Manhunt. This definitely won't be like Grand Theft Auto, because there's no killing in this game. You know, this is a lot more laid back, jovial, but it is very poignant. Like, it's very cutting in parts, because this type of evil you're more likely to see in real life. And by the end of the game, Jimmy, who starts off as a very rough kid in all senses of the word, has come around to the point where not only is he really not a bully, but he's the one who's sticking up for the little guys now. And on top of that, he's trying to a degree to extend some type of mercy, or at least understanding, to Gary. And Gary, because of his narcissistic tendencies, realizes he has not gotten his ways, and he is not used to that. And his meltdown is just colossal.
I bet.
Yeah. And so seeing a character within a video game, within a school setting in a video game, who does the things that he does, the way that he manipulates people, literally turns the whole school against you during like the third act. I was like, this kid is pure evil. Like, not only should he not leave this school, he should be put somewhere else entirely. But no, Gary is a real piece of shit. I mean, after all these years, I've never forgotten Gary. And I've always wondered if they would ever include Gary as the Easter egg in one of their other games for Rockstar. Maybe it's for the better that they haven't.
Yeah.
But, you know, Gary, at the end of the day, he doesn't change because of who he is as a person, but Jimmy does change because of who he is as a person. And I just really love the dynamic between those two, and, you know, just seeing what ends up happening with Gary in contrast to how he treats people from the beginning of the game and to how he becomes king of the mountain towards the end of the game, and to see him fall from grace, and just to see all the shit he did to get there, I thought was a phenomenal journey. Did not expect that from that video game, but also, fuck Gary, man. He's just the worst. He was so bad. He would do literally anything. I mean, anything to get ahead, just a little bit, or just to make himself feel better.
Right.
Yeah.
He sounds a lot like an Asher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like if Asher lived in like 1980, you know, instead of that time period.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, because like I've played a little bit of that game, but I do remember him, and when you mentioned him, I was like, oh yeah, that kid is a piece of shit, and that's just from my limited exposure to him. So I can only imagine how extreme it gets. You kind of make me want to go back and play the game now. So
it was a great game.
Yeah, because I don't have enough video games to play.
Yeah, right.
So. Well, Number 2, moving right along here, is a complex range of emotions. And my choice for a complex range of emotions is Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones.
Oh my gosh.
So just a couple of, and I'm really speaking more to like the first maybe 5 seasons of Cersei here, in the TV show, and that's all there is in the books, and maybe all there ever will be. But maybe we don't go off on that tangent.
Right.
But a complex range of emotions. I wrote down a few here. We see her hatred for Tyrion. That's the most common one. But she would not be a great villain if that was all that she had. Her love for Jaime, although toxic, she's convinced that she loves him.
Yeah.
As narcissists usually are. Her desire for approval from her father. We see that a lot. Her fear for her children, and eventually her fear of Joffrey. That first time that you find out that like he ordered all the babies to be killed, and she didn't even know about it, and she talks about how like she's afraid of. I think she confides in it may be Sansa at the time, and is like that she's terrified of him basically. And we see her rage at Joffrey's death eventually. And I thought that for this character, if all we ever saw her do was just kind of be a shitty member of the royalty or whatever, she would not have stood out as much as she did. In the books and early in the show, like Cersei she's conniving, but she's not smart, right? Like
That's a very good way to put it.
She has wisdom but not intelligence.
Right.
And they changed that in the later seasons of the show, which is one of the reasons why it's bad. But because in the book she's very dumb, right?
Oh, okay.
She's even dumber than she is in the show.
Really?
Yeah. But she still has all of this complex range of emotions, which makes her so interesting because we see her do things where it's like, well, someone would do that for their children, or most people have experienced that desire for someone else's approval. So there are these moments where you feel sorry for her, like even her hatred for Tyrion. In the beginning, when you find out that her mother died, giving childbirth to him, I think as a child, right, it would be a very understandable emotion to be like, I hate my little brother because he killed my mom. Now, when you're like 30, that's not a fucking emotion you should be having, or a thought process you should be having. So it's always like you can understand it to an extent, but then it's like, bitch, wait a minute now, like, and Cersei is very much a child. Right, I mean,
yeah, and you get that a lot from her, right? Like you really get the feeling that she has the vindictiveness of a child,
right? And we even see Robert, early in the show, Robert is never a good person,
right?
He's never a good king.
I'm not gonna let you shit talk Bobby B that way.
Yeah, well, fuck Bobby B. And we see where like, and this is like we were talking about earlier, where it's like, okay, you understand to a certain point. And it's like, you wouldn't want to be married to this guy, Right. It would be awful.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you get to live in a fucking castle. You don't have to worry about starving or whatever. So that's fine. But all your physical needs are being met. But like none of your emotional needs are being met. And you're just kind of overlooked, right? And for somebody like Cersei, who wants to be doted upon, that's like hell on earth. And then she kills him. And you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We were with you until this point. And then if that isn't enough, then she, does the whole thing where she betrays Ned and all that. Now, we can argue back and forth all day, like, was that Ned just being an idiot, right? Like, his honor outweighed his intelligence at that point. Because, honestly, I'm going to go ahead and tell you now, if I was in Cersei's position and some motherfucker came up to me and was like, hey,
I have all
this evidence against you, I'd be like, do you though?
Right. I'd be like, out of curiosity, who else has this evidence that you so speak of?
Right, yeah. And then, as you see it over time, you see where, like, she's completely inept as a ruler, right? Yeah. Like, she did all this backstabbing shit to get herself into this point. And then she's just completely out of her league, right? Like, if it weren't for Tywin, the kingdom falls apart before the credits roll in season 1.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then we just see that more and more where, like, Tyrion has to clean up for her mistakes. Tywin has to constantly clean up for her mistakes. later Jamie has to clean up for her mistakes, and like it's just it's like Cersei is like a toddler running around destroying things, and then everybody else on the show in her family is just kind of running around behind her, like picking up and
Right.
cleaning up things, and that's really the quality that gets more and more out of hand as the show goes on, until finally it's at the point where you just fucking detest her, right?
Yes.
You know, every time she opens her mouth, you're just like, shut the fuck up.
Right.
You know, and I think that makes her a great villain. Unfortunately, like I said, in the later seasons, it devolves into just completely unrealistic nonsense without any of the nuance that I was just talking about.
Right.
But I'd say in those first 5 seasons, maybe 6, she's just such a real well-written character to the point where when I see Lena Headey in anything else, I still hate her.
Right.
Because she played this role so well.
She did such a great job, right? And that's how you know that, like, not only is she a great actor, but the character was written so well, like you said, for those first 5 or so seasons. It's because there's such an ensemble cast of characters in Game of Thrones that are all, so many of them are so compelling for different reasons. But if for whatever reason they got rid of Cersei early, you would have felt that absence immediately.
Right.
Like you would have felt it immediately. I mean, I would go so far as to say that, like, even when Joffrey died, we all rejoiced, and maybe because we love to hate him, some people feel like, oh man, but he's gone. But even that wasn't that big of a wound, because I mean we got Ramsay.
Yeah, we had Ramsay by then, and he was way worse.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and so, like, yeah, I mean, Cersei, I completely agree. Yeah, she was a phenomenal villain.
Yeah.
Until she wasn't.
Right, and I think that, like, that complex range of emotions, obviously, like we said, a great villain embodies all 3 of these, but I think that complex range of emotions is what seals the deal with her, is that she really embodies that and really just personifies it, because without her seeing all those little things, she comes across as just this completely one-dimensional, like, evil type character.
Right.
But it's not that. It's that she's a mother, and she's got this family legacy, and she's got this complex kind of relationship with Tyrion and with Jaime, and she feels like she is defending her family and that she is in the right, and she deserves these things that she has. And I think without that, and without seeing all the emotions I listed, she just wouldn't have been as memorable.
Yeah.
So that's my number 2.
That's a great number 2. I mean, yeah, she has a complex range of emotions and a complex array of instabilities that should have been taken care of a long time ago.
Yeah, for sure. So.
Yeah. So my number 2, a complex range of emotions. Thankfully, that was really easy for me to choose. Jason Todd, the Red Hood. Yeah.
Such a good choice. I knew we would get a Batman somebody, but I did not think it would be Jason Todd.
Yeah. I went back and forth with so many of, like, my the Batman rogue gallery, but I narrowed it down to 3, and out of the 3, I was like, I think Jason's gonna be the one, man.
And Jason too is one of those characters where it'd be very easy to listen to what they say and agree with them.
Yeah. Absolutely, right? I mean, and so, like, with Jason Todd, in terms of, like, his array of, like, complex emotions, he has every right to feel everything that he does.
Right.
And it's so hard to argue against why he would feel that way.
Right.
I mean, the man survives death. Take that, oxymoron.
Yeah.
The man survives death. And here's the thing that people, I think, sometimes overlook, is that a lot of people think that Jason Todd was dead, comes back to life and wreaks havoc on Gotham. He actually came back to life not very long after he died. And so he spent a few years in hiding after he escaped the Al Ghul compound, right after Talia let him escape. And during that time frame, he held out hope for a long time. Once he gained his senses back and his wherewithal, he held out hope for a long time. The man who I consider to be my father, my mentor, my savior, he's gonna come. He's gonna get me out of this. He's gonna help me, and he never does. And then when you know it, the man who killed me is still alive and he hasn't done anything about that.
Let's unpack that because,
Yeah.
like, I think anybody in their right mind, like, let's say that you look to Batman or any character like that. Let's say it's Superman, Iron Man, whatever. Let's
Right.
just say that you are a ward or whatever. That's your mentor.
Yeah.
Some super powered Batman's not necessarily
Right.
super powered, but if you fight him, you believe he is. This person who is able to affect change on a level of a superhero, and you are killed helping them superhero
Yeah.
by just an average man.
Yeah.
I don't know about
Well,
average,
yeah.
but a regular non-powered person,
Right.
and you come back from the grave to find that they did not do anything about your murder.
Yeah.
I think anyone in their right mind would feel probably the exact same way that Jason feels here. And that's where it comes around to, like, you have the right to feel whatever you're going to feel, right? Everybody has the right to their own feelings.
Yes.
What you do as a result of those feelings, however, is
Right.
something else. And so here we are.
Yeah, and so here we are, right? Like, if that's all that Jason Todd did, then he wouldn't be on this list, you know?
No.
It's the gratuitous murder of everyone, and you can say, well, you know, Jason mostly murdered just bad guys. I'm like, okay, you know how like meme Batman, like the meme version of Batman, brutalizes, you know, drug dealers who are trying to take care of their kids. That's what Jason does, except he kills them.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
All of like the goons who would maybe get a broken arm or a few broken ribs from Batman get a bullet in the head from Jason.
He's like, I mean, he's really like Frank Castle, but worse.
Yes.
Right? Where it's like Frank Castle, for the most part, like, he really only goes after like people he knows are fucking bad
Right.
people. This is like, you know, Frank Castle just like shows up at the park and starts like
Right.
killing people.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And so with Jason, you really have this character here who he's not, and this is what I love about like the whole story of Under the Red Hood is that on the outside, it's on the surface level, Jason is killing because he's doing what Batman doesn't have the guts to do, to kill all these people who are ruining Gotham. But once you delve a little bit deeper, you realize Jason is killing these people because he knows that would hurt Bruce the most.
Right.
And I think there's so much there to unpack with that because he's just such a, he's an emotional mess. I mean, one of the strongest parts of the whole story is right there at the end with Batman, Joker, and Jason. And I mean, he breaks it all down for Bruce. You know, he says, I don't blame you for letting me die, but why on God's earth is he, the Joker, still alive?
Right. And that line, Jensen Ackles.
Oh man,
killed it.
Yeah.
In the animated movie.
he did. He did. Oh, it was so good.
I've read that comic since I watched the anime, and I read it almost, just the Kevin Conroy kind of way. Like, I read Red Hood's dialogue in his voice.
Right.
You know?
You kind of have to, right? Because it's so fitting. As a matter of fact, about maybe 2 years ago, there was like this kind of subpar mediocre kind of choose your own adventure style Batman DVD that came out for A Death in the Family, kind of like the prelude to Under the Red Hood, right?
Right.
It was where we see Jason Todd die, but it was like, well, what if Jason Todd lived, and what if this happened with him? Anyways, when Kevin and I were watching it, you know, we did a review on that, and I was like, there were a few parts that were okay, but for the most part, I did not like it. And one of those things is that, like, the voice actor for Red Hood was not Jensen Ackles.
Yeah.
And it hurt it. It hurt it.
That's actually probably one of the things that I hate about the Gotham Knights game, but that's on a very long list of things I hate about that game.
Yeah. There's a lot with that game. But, man, with Jason, though, it's like you understand exactly where he's coming from, and you also understand why this man is so broken. It's like, even if his mind wasn't warped by the Lazarus pit, he would still be fucked up.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Like when he delivers that line too, like the why is he still alive, with so much emotion that you forget that he's a fucking lunatic, right?
Right.
Where it's like in that moment you feel so much empathy towards his situation, and you can't help but just like I said, just empathize with him, because it's like anybody would feel that way,
Right.
and you kind of forget that he's a ravenous murderer.
Yeah. You kind of put all that aside.
Yeah.
And I would say to that, like, first of all, I think that everybody should, in some way, shape, or form, experience Under the Red Hood, whether it be the comic book or the animated movie. They're both phenomenal. But also, I would dare say that Three Jokers is quite the strong kind of spiritual successor to that story. I mean, the three main protagonists in that is Batman, Jason Todd, and Barbara Gordon. Arguably three people who have been affected the most by Joker, and you get to see a lot of that trauma and how. And it's so. The reason I bring that up is because it's so interesting to see how Barbara handles her trauma in comparison to how Jason handles his.
Right.
And like to see how different they are in their approaches and their viewpoints of it all, and how they cope with it. And I mean, Barbara in so many ways is so strong, like and tough, just mentally and also from emotionally, and how Jason has come a long way, but still has a long ways to go with how he deals with certain things. And I mean, so yeah, like for all that and more, man, I think that Jason is just he's a great choice for a villain who has a complex range of emotions.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent choice for this one. So that was fantastic. So I'm convinced now that we do not have the same list at all, which is excellent.
All right.
So,
if you fuck it up now, it'd be hilarious.
No, I definitely won't. There's no way. One of the characters in the protagonist episode that I mentioned, and I will put a warning here that there are some major spoilers for the Stormlight Archive and what I'm about to say. So if you are in the middle of reading that right now, you probably should not listen to this next part. Maybe give it about 15 minutes.
That's right.
Just fast forward.
You gotta see that 15 seconds fast forward button. Hit that a bunch of times.
Bunch of times. Yeah, about 60. That being said, so my character that I picked for the protagonist episode was Kaladin Stormblessed. And one of the things we talked about with him is how he has gone through all of this trauma at the hands of the Light Eyes, which is the nobility or like the upper caste in the world or in his society. Like that was kind of like an element of his like tragic backstory. And so the character that I have picked for number 3, a point of view that justifies their actions, is actually his opposite. And this character's name is Moash. And he sounds like an asshole just right off the rip. So he is a slave, the same as Kaladin. He is a bridge runner as well. And I went over this in the protagonist episode, but basically the bridge runners, it's a really like horrific form of slavery here, where
I remember you telling me about this.
Yeah, they take these big ass wooden bridges and they run them up ahead of the army. And then the army goes across, and then they slide them back over the chasm, and then they have to like outrun the army to the next gap and slide the bridge across, and they do this over and over again until they get to like the opposing army that they're going to fight, and then they have to run this bridge up in the face of all of the enemy's archers and stuff, and they usually have about 25 of these big ass bridges, because like more than half of them aren't going to make it up. Like too many of them are going to die. So he's in this same situation with Kaladin. He has such a similar backstory. And the reason that he distrusts the Light Eyes is because there's a character in the book named Elokar who he's a prince at the time that this happens, but at the time of the book, he is actually the king. And basically, there was some kind of dispute involving his grandparents, Moash's grandparents. And he threw them in a dungeon to die, basically. Left them in there just to rot to death, essentially. And so, obviously, like, Moash is traumatized by this. His grandparents were actually who took care of him, so this kind of set him on this path to where he ended up as a slave. And one thing leads to another, and Kaladin kind of leads all of the bridge runners out of their servitude, right?
Right.
And they actually become kind of the guards for the king. And there's even a point in the story where a full suit of shard plate and a shard blade, both of these items are like of infinite value, are given to Kaladin, and Kaladin does not want them. He doesn't want to appear as a light eye, so he ends up giving them to like his second in command, which is Moash, and so he gives them both of them.
Oh shit!
And yeah, so Moash is like his most trusted kind of person.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, as it turns out, he later conspires to kill the king that they are supposed to be protecting, because of what he did to his grandparents all these years ago. And when Kaladin finds this out, he like confronts him, and he's just like, listen, we swore an oath to protect the king. Like, the whole reason that we're standing here is that, these other men didn't, like they were without honor. They didn't hold up to what they said they were going to do. And if you do this, then you're no different than them. You're exactly as they are.
Right.
And you kind of get the idea that Moash is going to relent, but then he doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
And this leads him down a series of choices where the reason he is such a good antagonist for Kaladin is because they have similar backstories, but Moash is Kaladin if he made basically all the wrong choices.
Right.
And that's why there's such an interesting dynamic between the two, and also why there's such an understanding between the two. They understand each other so well. And kind of like Kaladin's whole thing is like that he wants to protect everybody. And it's kind of him coming to the grips that he cannot. And like Moash to him is like his ultimate kind of failure.
Yeah.
And Moash realizes that, and he recognizes that savior complex in Kaladin, and he exploits it to the maximum extent that he can. And and the reason I chose him for this is like because of all those things that happened to him throughout the story, he feels entirely justified in what he's doing. He's like, no, these people put you in chains. You know what I mean? It's like that. Like if it were up to them, we would be laying dead out there in one of those chasms. And he just everything that he does from then on, he feels 100% justified in it. And those choices lead him into some incredibly terrible situations later on, and he just keeps kind of going down that path. He's just
like a snowball effect.
Yeah, he's irredeemable, basically. And you kind of get the idea that at this point in time, where the story's at, where I left off, which is all that there is at this time, you really never know if it's either he realizes where he is, like he's aware, and is just like, fuck it, I'm too far gone.
Yeah.
Or if he's just completely like has missed the boat, like I had to do all of this.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you don't really know. But everyone hates him.
Yeah. And see, that's interesting because it's like, because like you said, if he is aware that he has just, man, I've gone, like I realized that, man, I've gone so far, but there's no turning back now, or is it the mentality of, I need to stay the course. And if I stay the course, then,
Right.
I really dig that aspect. Man, I remember when you told me about Kaladin during the Protagonist episode, and I was like, man, that guy sounds really badass. I probably should have seen it coming that you would use his kind of his what I would assume to be like his greatest foe,
right?
For the antagonist. That makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I don't think that Moash hates Kaladin. I never really got that impression, but he definitely is working against him, and he understands more than anyone how to get to Kaladin. Like, he understands that no one, at least nobody that's available, is going to beat Kaladin in a fight.
Right.
He's like, it's almost a Goku thing. It's like, he's strong enough to beat whoever he's going to beat. That's his power.
Yeah.
He will find a way to kill you. But he knows that that's not the way to beat him. What he actually is trying to get Kaladin to do in the later kind of books is he's trying to get him to commit suicide.
Oh.
Because there's a moment in the very first book where he contemplates it. I actually have and there's an image of it over there on the shelf of him standing on the ledge. It's on the bottom shelf there behind the lost metal.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's Kaladin standing on the cliff contemplating plunging to his death.
He's got the Kratos going on.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And basically like that's a moment that he uses to torment him. They call that the honor chasm, where you can go there and you can leap to your death rather than dying while running in the bridge. That's your way out.
They don't have a third option?
No. Okay. And he kind of torments him with that. And he says, Kaladin, what if I could take you back there? Everything that's happened to you. He's like, don't you wish you had just done it? And that's what he's like trying to dig at him, because he's trying to destroy him mentally and emotionally, because he knows that's probably the only way you're ever going to beat him. So.
Oh, man, that's dark and heavy.
He's fucked up, man. He is so fucked up. God. Like, someone asked Brandon Sanderson at a recent thing to like describe Moash's character using only positive words, and he just stood there for a minute, and he was just like, "And there you have it." And he just said, "Yeah, he's
that's
supremely
amazing.
Hated. He's a huge piece of shit."
That's amazing.
I have a "Fuck Moash" shirt in my closet. In there.
So I don't know if are you on like any of like the Cosmere subreddits or anything like that by chance?
Probably all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how many people have you? Because they've got to exist. How many people have you found that are like defenders or apologists for Moash?
There are a very select few that are like that. Most of the time when you see it, though, it's blatant trolling. Like they're not doing it with any kind of seriousness. There are I have seen some people that will kind of like try to sympathize with him a little bit, but I would say the overwhelming amount of the fandom really fucking hates this dude. Like, there are other characters that are also like kind of irredeemable, where you'll see some of that where it's like, well, but there's not a lot of Moash sympathizers.
Sounds like it'd be like finding Frieza sympathizers. That Frieza, he's
yeah, it's kind of like that, where you can understand why, like it's like we said with number one, it's like, yeah, you understand their motive to an extent, and then they do things that are like beyond that, where it's like, first, it's just the little things where it's like he conspires to kill Elhokar. And I'll tell you this about Elhokar. Nobody particularly likes him. He's not really a guy that you're like rooting for.
Right.
But you're like, well, but they swore an oath, right? And really, you don't even care so much that he is trying to kill Elhokar. It's that you don't want him to do this to Kaladin.
Oh, okay.
And if originally he is he almost successfully gets Kaladin to join in with him and his co-conspirators to assassinate the king. Yeah. And that kind of starts him on that path where you're just like, Kaladin makes the right choice and Moash does not. And then it's, okay, well, we're going to, all right, well, I mean, we were going to do that. Well, we could kill this person. All right, well, we could lead these kind of like invaders into like taking over a city, and well, we could kill a bunch of people, and it just kind of just spitballs into where he's almost at an Asher level of there's nothing he wouldn't do at this point. He's almost reveling in it,
right?
So, jeez, yeah, he's kind of the worst.
Yeah, it sounds that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, he sounds like a real piece of shit.
He is a huge piece of shit. And He's kind of like that villain where it's like there's no death that's too that would be too good for him, and like nothing like misfortune continues to happen to him, but it's not good enough. Like I want it to be worse.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Damn. So he's been brought down, but not low enough for you.
Right. Yeah. Because like really, he never like when he's with Kaladin, I mean they're the king's guards. You know what I mean? Like they went from slaves to the king's guards. You know what I mean? It's like they went from sleeping on the ground.
Started from the bottom, now we're here.
Yeah, they went from sleeping on the ground to sleeping in the castle.
Right.
You know what I mean? And yeah, I mean they technically still work for the king or whatever, but they're free. They're not,
Right.
And it's just that's kind of the highest point he gets to because he leaves all of that out of this desire for vengeance, right? And there's just and it just doesn't stop there, right? And he even, of course, he does actually eventually kill Elhokar, and there's that moment where he, this is like what he's been focused on his whole life, and he feels no gratification from it whatsoever. He still feels just as empty,
Right.
And that just leads him that just fucks him up even worse.
Right.
I think, is that he's just more driven now to try to find. He's got this kind of giant gaping hole in himself, and he's just trying to fill it with everything wrong that rather than like taking a look at himself in the mirror, which he doesn't want to do.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, characters like that typically can't do that.
Yeah, it'd be like Lex Luthor,
right?
Taking a look at himself, he'd probably implode.
Right. Yeah. Man, that's a good one.
Yeah,
and you did a great job of like explaining that to somebody who doesn't know anything about that.
He's a real asshole.
Yeah. He sounds it. So, for my number 3 here, it's interesting that it does come down to like a point of view that justifies their actions, because my number 3, right, when I was speaking to you in like weeks prior, and I was telling you how like, for the most part, I had my list together, but I was going back and forth between a few of them. So the ones that I was always going back and forth between was Ozymandias, who I was going to use, but then I was like, I know I want to use the Red Hood, so I might not, and I wanted to limit myself to one comic book character.
And Ozymandias is such a good character for this third one.
Absolutely, yeah, he's so befitting. And for those who don't know, Watchmen is my favorite comic book of all time, and Ozymandias is that guy.
Right.
But because I wanted to do one video game, one comic book, and one movie, my option, while it wasn't Ozymandias, was still really easy for me. Elijah Price, Unbreakable.
Oh man, that's so good. That's so good. That's tremendous.
Yeah, I mean, so for those of you who have not seen Unbreakable, I cannot recommend it enough. It is, it's phenomenal.
Watch Unbreakable and Split, and then make up your own ending for Glass. Just don't watch Glass at all.
Yeah,
just watch Unbreakable. Like, don't get me wrong. Elijah Price is the best part of Glass.
He is
by far.
Yeah,
and he's the titular character there.
Right.
But damn, that movie is horrible.
Yeah, it really is.
The more I think about it, the worse it is.
I know.
And I never want to watch it again. And
same.
If I could mind wipe like one movie from my brain, I think it'd be that one.
You know, it might be, because I think at this point I'd rather wonder, man, what if M. Night made that third movie?
Right. Yeah. How good would that have been? Where it's like, if I only could choose one, like I couldn't get rid of the whole sequel trilogy.
Right.
So erasing The Last Jedi from my mind wouldn't help much. But if I could save this, that would be amazing.
Yeah. That's a good call, actually.
But goddamn, Unbreakable is such a good movie. And Unbreakable only becomes better over time.
It's like the opposite of Glass in that regard.
Yeah.
Because when I first saw Glass, I was like, because we did a review on that one, and I was like, I don't love this movie, but I don't hate it either. But as time went on, it just got worse for me.
Yeah.
Whereas Unbreakable, every time I watch it, I'm thrilled by it.
I feel like so when I first saw that movie, I think we were teenagers.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was 2000.
yeah, and I loved it then.
Yeah.
But like when I watch it as an adult now, I appreciate it so much more than I did then.
Same.
And like when that movie was made, the cultural zeitgeist wasn't superheroes.
Right.
You know, we weren't at that age yet. A couple of superhero things existed, Batman 89, all that.
Yeah.
But it was not the phenomenon that it is today.
Yeah.
You know, going and seeing Batman in the theater, that didn't even make you a nerd then.
Yeah.
You know, Michael Keaton was a famous actor. It was a
Exactly.
good movie. You know, and then now it's just like, oh, well, the MCU, everybody's familiar with that.
Right.
You know, they're like the Adam Sandler movies of the 90s. Like, that's the MCU now. It's like everybody's seen that shit.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right.
And they went to shit eventually. But
right.
anyway.
Yeah. Well, you know. But you know, the interesting thing about Unbreakable as a movie is how M. Night takes a look at like the dynamic between superheroes and villains in comic books, and he has this character Elijah Price, played brilliantly by Sam Jackson.
It's his favorite. I mean, it's my favorite role of his by far.
I mean, I think so too. It's like Nick Fury tried to give him a run for his money, and also Jules and Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
But man, Elijah Price, that does it for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, he's this comic book connoisseur, and like it's just such a brilliant story, man. Because he starts off, I mean, right from the get go, we understand that he was born with this unfortunate bone disease, or he has the basic name for it is brittle bone disease. There's an actual name for it that I can't pronounce. And I mean, so he lives his entire life basically being very careful because he's extremely delicate. And he is obsessed with comic books to the point where he breaks them down. He thinks like me if I were a genius in the darkest timeline and was evil.
Yeah.
Because the way he looks at comic books, he views them as more than just stories. He views them as like biological code that has been genetically passed down in ways that we used to tell stories and mythology.
Yeah.
And then that's the way that he views them, that they're more than just these stories, they're messages.
Yeah. They're like the mythology of the human race, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And basically, spoiler alert. So again, if you haven't seen it,
if you haven't seen this 23-year-old film,
yeah,
this film is old enough for you to fuck it.
Yeah, legally without much guilt.
Yeah.
But you know the big twist here is that you know we have Bruce Willis's character David, and you know what we have here with him is that he has exhibited powers exhibited abilities that make him maybe superhuman. And this is what Elijah's been trying to do the whole time, is trying to convince David, look, you survived this horrific train wreck that no one else survived, and somehow you walk away unscathed. That's not just luck or fortune. There's something here. And throughout the course of the movie, David comes to realize that, okay, he does. There is something there. And so, you know, by the end of the movie, David does this heroic act, and he saves these children from this maniac. And he goes and he confronts Elijah, and he's like, "You were right, and I did it. That was me in the paper." And then they have this moment where they're finally on the same page, the two of them. And David says to Elijah, "So what now?" And Elijah says, "Well, now we shake hands." And one of David's abilities is that he can touch people and get a glimpse into their life and what they do. And so when they shake hands, David sees all of the atrocities that Elijah has committed in order to find that person who is the opposite of him. Elijah believed that since he was born so brittle and so physically inferior to everyone else, that there must be an opposite because the comic book says so.
Right.
And I will never forget this part of the movie. Is so good. David steps back and he's just stunned at this revelation. And Elijah says to him, "Now that I know who you are, I know who I am. I am not a mistake." And this is him accepting his role. He views David as the hero, and he views himself as the necessary villain.
Right.
And he goes on this tirade as David is leaving, just completely stunned. He goes on this tirade saying things like, and they're always friends like you and I, and they're opposite of one another, and this, that, and the third, referring to comic book characters and whatnot. And he goes, and you know why I did this, David? It's because of the kids. They called me Mr. Glass. And
Chills.
oh, just chills every time.
Yeah, it's one of the best moments
Yeah.
in a movie, and honestly, like, it's unfortunate that so much of M. Night's catalog is fucking garbage.
God.
Because it's like, it would be like if, what's the guy that made The Room?
Tommy, why so?
Yeah, it'd be like if he just spit out like a fucking like amazing, well-written film. Because the thing about this movie, if Unbreakable came out today, I think it might make $1 billion.
Oh yeah,
because you've taken this movie. It's a superhero film,
right.
but there is hardly any. I almost said high spots, wrestling terminology. There's no CG in it at all.
Right. Yeah.
There's maybe 2 or 3 fight scenes, and they're very minimal. They're very rugged.
Right.
There's more fantastical fight scenes in Breaking Bad than there is in this movie.
Yeah.
They're very like down to earth. There's nothing crazy. The only thing in this movie that's not completely grounded and believable is the fact that David has superpowers.
Yeah.
And you're doubting that for 60% of the film.
Absolutely. And I mean, even after David saves the kids, you're like, I mean, he could just be a really strong guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like you, it's like the thing that tips it over is David can kind of get this premonition about people when he touches them. And it's like, I can't think of anything for that.
Yeah. Yeah. But like this movie is such a grounded and serious look at the superhero, supervillain dynamic, and even the concept of like everything in nature is on a spectrum, right? Hardly anything in nature doesn't work on a spectrum like this, and so it's not unreasonable for Elijah Price to think like, okay, there has to be somebody that's the opposite of me, right? Like, you look at every virus out there,
Right.
some people will be naturally immune to that virus. Some people will get sick, and then some people will die from it.
Right.
Poison ivy. Some people are super allergic to it, and it'll fuck them right up. Some people get the normal, like it'll just be itchy for a while, whatever. And some people are completely immune, and they could bathe in it.
Yeah.
There's always a spectrum in nature. And so it is not unreasonable for Elijah Price to believe this way. And as we talked about earlier, what makes it unreasonable is the lengths he's willing to go to prove it.
He goes through some horrendous lengths to prove it, from setting a hotel on fire and like blocking the exit so people can't get out.
And I'm gonna tell you, I have never been comfortable on a train since 2000.
Yeah, absolutely not. Like that train crash was, oh my, yeah, and it was terrible. Like just the unsettling nature of how it happens, and yeah, the fact that he orchestrated all of that.
Yeah, that scene where he wakes up. Was one of the most. I mean, it's such a well shot scene,
right?
Because the camera pans up to where you have a top down view, and like I haven't seen this movie in years, and I can describe this scene to you. That's how good it is. And David is laying on one bed, and on the other bed you see what looks like a mummy because the body is like head to toe bandages.
Yeah,
and he's asking David these questions. And David is not even like hooked up to anything. He's just in his like normal clothes. And the doctor's talking to him and asking him these questions. He's like, why are you asking me all these questions? And he says, well, because in a moment you're going to be the only survivor of this train crash. And as this is happening, you see like the blood start to expand on the other body.
Right.
And it flatlines in while they're having this conversation. And like that was just such a well done scene. And then later in the film, he goes and visits the remainder of the wreckage, and you see the state that the cars are in, and you're like, no one could have survived this.
Yeah.
It's a straight up miracle.
It is that David not only survives but walks away unscathed.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's such a well done film, and like I said, other than if Split had never come out, you would have just thought he just stole somebody else's homework. He just paid some writer to write him a great script and not tell anyone.
Right.
And he was like, "Yeah, guys, I finally did it." Yeah. But Split is also such a great movie.
Split is also a great movie, and then that ending where you hear them talk about Mr. Glass.
Yeah, the music.
And the music cue first.
Me.
Yeah.
I stood up in the theater. So I went to go see Split not knowing anything, right?
Yeah.
I had never seen a trailer, anything like that. When they start panning around the zoo at the end and the music kicks in, I literally got out of my seat in the theater, and I was like, no fucking way.
Then you see Bruce Willis correcting the people talking about,
I lost my shit. And and then it's weird. They just never made another movie after
I know. You think that M. Night would have,
jumped
made
a third one.
Yeah. It's the weirdest thing.
It is strange. It's unlike Hollywood to just give up money like that.
I know. It's the same reason why, for some reason, Naughty Dog hasn't made a sequel to Last of Us yet.
That's true.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford's doing all this work. You'd think they could have made another Indiana Jones, but they just did the 3.
They just did the 3, and then they stopped for some weird reason.
Yeah.
So Elijah, a.k.a. Mr. Glass, he completely thinks that what he's doing is justifiable. And, for obvious reasons, it's just not.
Right.
He's just completely off the deep end on this.
Yeah.
And, but it's such a fun ride. And, it's one of those movies where it's like, even the first time I watched it, I was like, I can't believe I didn't see that coming.
Right.
But I remember, when Kevin and I were roommates, he hadn't seen it. And I was like, sit your ass down. I know what we're doing right now. and we watched it, and he felt the same way. He was like, I can't believe I didn't see that twist. What's a twist?
What's a twist?
Yeah. And that's just the mark of good storytelling, when you're so enveloped in what's happening, you're not thinking about what could be.
And it's crazy, too, because even then, M. Night was known for his random twist at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So we all should have been looking for it, and I think we were. The other thing about this movie, too, is, you sit down and look at it, and I don't know that I would have saw the twist coming, if I watched it fresh, right now.
Right.
It's just well done.
Yeah.
And also there's that trope in Hollywood where you almost think he's going to be the Obi-Wan, that he's going to be the old gruffy mentor kind of guy that finds the hero. And so I think a lot of people, I think the movie plays off of that trope as well.
That he's going to be the guy in the chair for the hero.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he is in a chair.
Well, yeah. He is in a chair. So they really go to far lengths, to make you think that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that was just incredible, and so just to see him, justify those horrendous things.
That's such a great pick.
Yeah,
dude.
I had to go with Elijah.
Yeah. We all had. I wouldn't have guessed any of those.
Well, likewise.
Yeah. So that was great. So do we have honorable mentions? Do we got any others?
I already mentioned one was Ozymandias.
Yeah.
I think he's just such a great pick for someone who justifies doing something terrible.
Yeah.
And standing by it, killing 2 million people in order to more than likely save everyone else in the world,
Yeah.
And it's such a cool conundrum that over 30 years later, people online still debate it.
We're still talking about it, yeah. I got to put Victor Samuel Mackey on the list. Obviously, he's one of my favorite villains of all time, and I almost picked him.
So he's so vile, you consider him the villain?
I would consider him to be an antagonist.
Okay.
He is the pro and antagonist at the same time.
I need to watch this show, man.
You really do. I mean, it is Walter White to more of an extreme, I would say.
Wow.
Because he is willing to go to much further depths. Like a lot of the things that Walter like manipulates other people into doing, so he doesn't have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Vic is just like fuck it. I would say ultimately it's very clear that he is a villain.
Yeah. Okay.
But you still root for him. Like he's also still the protagonist.
Right.
He is the main character. Right. And one of the things that I think the reason that S.H.I.E.L.D. is number one for me is because they stick the landing.
That's so important.
The finale, I've never met anyone who has watched that show all the way through and dislikes the finale in any way.
Yeah.
Everyone is under the consensus of this is the perfect way to end a long-running TV show like this. It's the reason Sopranos can't be on the list. It's the reason that fucking what's
Ozark?
the Netflix Ozark? Thank you.
Yep.
Ozark can't be on the. Oh my God, they botched it. It's the reason that Game of Thrones can't be on the list.
Right.
Like they only remember the finish.
Yep.
And that show for somebody like myself who watched it over. I started watching it while, like, I think went right after season 3 ended. Mm-hmm. So I watched that show over 5 years, and the ending is just so perfect to me, and I remember every second of it. Like, and I haven't watched the show in a few years, so that he is definitely somebody I could have picked for this list. But I didn't because I don't want to spoil the show for you.
Gotcha.
So
much appreciated.
Also, we would be here for hours because there's just so much that we could delve into of like just the shit.
Yeah.
That this man gets into. So he's definitely one for me.
I had Gustavo Fring on my list.
Gustavo Fring is an excellent one.
And I don't know if you ever watched Better Call Saul.
I've seen the first season. I never really got huge into it, but I hear it gets really good.
It gets really, really good. It gets really good. And, cause they just put the last season on Netflix, and so I binged it in, like, a day, Yeah. They do this thing with Gustavo, right, where, like, they don't take away or ruin the integrity of anything they did with him in Breaking Bad, but they just kind of add tent poles to support why he is the way that he is. And it's just really, really cool to see the kind of further evolution of this vile character, So, so just that added on with how he is in Breaking Bad, it just further reinforces that Gus is just not to be fucked with.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I didn't put any video game characters on my list, but certainly if I had, I probably would have had Kuja from Final Fantasy IX on the list. Final Fantasy is not really known for great villains. Most of them are just straight up mustache twirling.
They are. Sephiroth, for me, is an exception.
Sephiroth is really good.
Yeah.
I thought that Kuja made a much better case for why he was doing what he was doing, whereas Sephiroth, it does kind of lean into, like, I'm doing it because fuck you, that's why.
Well, that and, like, my whole life has been a lie.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. And in a lot of ways similar to, like, Moash, like, he comes at Cloud like, don't, look, we're the same.
Right.
Like, you should feel the same way. Come with me. And Cloud's like, nah, bro.
Right.
That's fucked up. He's like, what? And it's very similar.
You killed my healer.
Right, yeah. Every damn time.
Right.
Sephiroth is a great one. Kefka from 6 is a great villain, but I really would struggle to put him on any of these lists because he is just evil. Like he's just so evil that it works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he doesn't really fit these, like other than the first one, but he just does the first one so well that you're like,
I contemplated putting Zeus from God of War on my list.
Yeah. Or from anything.
Or from anything ever with the name Zeus. Yeah. Even what's the name of that movie? I think Hulk Hogan was in it. It had fucking Debo.
Yeah.
He plays a character named Zeus. Even that Zeus.
Even that Zeus, yeah. Anything with Greek mythology in it to any extent, you go ahead and put Zeus on the list.
Yeah. But the reason I didn't include Zeus is because I realized I like the aftermath of that even more so than I actually enjoyed the character, just because it just represented how even after Kratos was done, he still felt empty.
Right.
Like killing Zeus, his ultimate goal didn't do anything for him.
Yeah. Odin was so well done in the,
oh my
in
gosh,
the second series.
yes.
Yeah. Even for only appearing in the one, and that the actor that plays him is so good too. I love him everything. And we just recently talked about West Wing.
Yeah.
Because you were like, I didn't know you were such a big West Wing fan.
Right.
He's one of the main characters on West Wing.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
I can see a political character pulling that role off.
Yeah. He's like, I think he's either the chief of staff or he's like the speechwriter for the president. I think he's the chief of staff though. No. I think he is just a speechwriter, but he's like the head speechwriter for the White House or whatever. I think.
Did you watch West Wing as it was coming out?
I watched a little bit of it back then, but when I finally sat down and watched the whole show and really appreciated it was like 2 or 3 years ago.
Gotcha. I was like, what kind of kid sits down and goes, I want to watch West Wing?
Yeah, because that shit wasn't even in HD. No. When I was 10, that shit would have bored me. Yeah. Such a great show, though. It really is. Yeah, tremendous. And that show, like Unbreakable, only gets better.
Yeah.
Over time because it's from a time where our like political system at least kind of worked a little bit.
Oh yeah,
and that's really the fantasy of that show,
right?
Is a political system that works.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so you can do that show today; it'd be too unbelievable.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is 100%. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, you used the Game of Thrones character. I had Ramsay as like a backup, but I was like, at the end of the day, Ramsay, he's, as much as I love him and the actor, Ramsay is probably one of the more one-dimensional characters from the show.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think Tywin is an excellent.
Oh, Tywin is, he's excellent.
We don't really see
Charles Dance, we
don't really see like the complex range of emotions from him, but he definitely has the other two. And really, you rarely even feel like it's malice for him. He definitely never sees it that way.
It's just cold calculation.
Yeah, it's just this is what's necessary.
Right.
He never gives a second thought to it.
And I would even make a case for like the complex emotions. Like he doesn't display them, but I think he feels them and processes them in a way where like he kind of keeps that. He puts that in the back, and then he uses like his logical side of his brain to move forward.
Right.
And that's kind of the difference between like Tywin and oh man, I forgot his name. Otto.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like the differences between those two characters for me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean there's just so many that it's funny, like nobody picked a single Marvel character. But we brought up Magneto.
Yeah, we brought up Magneto and
He's
Thanos.
such a good example.
Yeah.
Victor Von Doom, from the pages, would be an amazing choice.
Absolutely. If
we could get that on screen.
If we could, again, it's amazing how like no one has ever made a live action Doctor Doom.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah,
you'd have thought. I thought I maybe heard some casting at one point, but like the movie never came out.
Movie just never came. Yeah, it's the weirdest thing, man.
Yeah, it is weird. But, so a couple things I wanted to do before we wrap up here. So, what effect do you think a poor villain has on a narrative?
Yeah, so the effects that a poor villain has on a narrative, right? How do I put this, man? So, let me use an example here. It's like the Joel Schumacher era of Batman was a dark era. But I think
literally you couldn't see shit.
Except for the neon.
Yeah.
But I think literally everyone would agree that Forever is way better than Batman and Robin.
Yes.
And that's for a multitude of reasons. But one of those reasons is because at least with Forever, we get Two-Face, which is whatever, but we get the Riddler, who really seems to be, who I consider to be like the main villain of that movie.
Yeah. Even though most of what Tommy Lee Jones was given in that movie was garbage.
Mm-hmm.
I still enjoyed watching it because he's just watching him be ridiculous is fun.
It is like why, and then like as a kid I didn't notice it, but as an adult it's obvious he's just trying to out Jim Carrey, which is impossible.
Right? Yeah. But I think he was just trolling himself. Like I think he was just like, I'm a better actor than this.
Yeah.
My agent is fired.
Right.
And he's like, well, I'm just gonna have fun.
And then he did Men in Black.
I like Men in Black.
Oh, me too.
Oh,
I'm just saying, but like, you know, we talk about the ridiculous aspect.
But at least in Men in Black,
he plays a serious character.
He's straight face. Yeah, he's the straight man in Men in Black.
That's true.
So,
but you know, you compare that with the villains in Batman and Robin, particularly Mr. Freeze, where they take everything that's great about that character. Okay, you gotta remember, like. The animated series has been out for a few years.
Yeah.
When this movie came out. So there's no excuses for the version of Mr. Freeze we got, right? Like this version of Mr. Freeze was like 98% ice puns and then 2% Nora.
And not only had the animated series been out for a while, but Matthew McConaughey was alive. They could have got him. He was alive. He was acting back then.
All right. Hey, guys. Thank you guys for being here. This has been another episode of Entertainment Evolved.
Even you can't say he would have done a worse job than Arnold.
God damn it. Oh, yeah. That's...
Well, actually, with this script, it would have been just as bad.
It would have been just as bad. Yeah.
Actually, I think I'd rather watch Matthew McConaughey make the ice puns. If I had the choice.
You know what?
But to be fair, though, when they make the next Mr. Freeze live action, whether it's Batman 2, Batman 3, or something James Gunn and them are going to do, the animated series will have been out for like 25 years. Right. So they will really have no excuse.
Yeah, there will really be no excuse then.
And there's the Arkham games, where he's like almost equally great.
Oh, yeah, and you know, a lot of the Arkham games, like even like the DLC with Mr. Freeze, and a lot like the main story and the Arkham comic book, a lot of that was written by Paul Dini.
Yeah,
the guy who reimagined Mr. Freeze in the first place.
Right.
And so that's kind of why that all flows together so well in that Arkham series. But you know, to answer your question though, it's like. If your villain is just, if there's nothing there, it's just a big old nothing burger, then you end up with, it's going to hinder your story, right? Just because it's not adding anything of value.
You're really working against yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to say it's impossible to make a great story without a great, and let me not say villain, but let me say antagonist here. It's not impossible, but you're handicapping the shit out of yourself. You're really setting yourself up for failure by doing that. The first Ant-Man obviously comes to mind.
Right.
Where it's like, that's easily the worst thing about that movie.
Yeah.
You know? It's really enjoyable other than that aspect where you don't really, like, the villain's is just a plot device.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned Guardians 1 earlier. I love Guardians 1 actually, but Ronan the Accuser, I don't think anybody exactly remembers him.
Yeah, Lee Pace was criminally underused.
Right.
Not that he's bad as the character.
No.
I think he brought the character to life very well. He just wasn't given anything to do.
He was giving absolutely nothing to do.
Yeah.
Which again, you know, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, I had to think about who the villain was for the second one. It was Ego. I had to remember that.
Yeah.
And, you know, even that was, I mean,
I think
Kurt Russell had fun.
Yeah, I think Ego is a better villain.
He
but
is.
Just the movie is bad.
Yeah.
And judging by the reviews, I don't know if you've looked at any, but I across the board, I think people have been rating the third one higher than the second one. So.
Oh, well, I mean, that's good.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Maybe we will too.
Yeah. But man, like when you have just a shitty villain, like worst case scenario, right? I would say like take like a good villain, right, can elevate a mediocre Marvel movie, right,
Right.
and make it a really good movie. Whereas if it's a mediocre Marvel movie but the villain is bad, it's gonna degrade that
Yeah.
score. Yeah,
Ant-Man 2.
Ant-Man too. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I mean Guardians too. Like I'm
yeah.
not gonna say Ego was. I think Ego was better done than Ronan, but he wasn't great, and his plot didn't really make a whole lot of sense. And then you take the fact that they split the party for most of the film,
Yeah.
and it just gets worse.
Right. Right. Agreed.
It's downhill from there.
Yeah.
And a lot of it too, like I'm no fan of Man of Steel. The only thing that makes that movie watchable to me, Michael Shannon fucking kills it as Zod. But then you look at the sequel to that, you look at Batman versus Superman.
Yeah.
And the antagonist is trash.
Right.
And
Right.
actually all the antagonists
Yeah, I
are
was
trash.
gonna say I didn't like Darkseid. I didn't like Lex.
Doomsday is terrible.
Yeah, I meant to say Doomsday. Yeah, I said Darkseid. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Darkseid, I think in the
He-
extended cut is in the movie for about 2 seconds.
Yeah, I think so.
He
You
like
see, his
talks to
silhouette
Lex real quick. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And like that to me was like, at least not the theatrical cut, but
Yeah.
the extended cut of that movie. I think if you had a great Lex, that puts that movie in a whole different category.
Oh,
than
it
it's
does.
in.
Yeah, and that's a great example because that would really have elevated BVS.
Yeah.
I mean, but and admittedly, like, yeah, the writing and also the directing of Jesse Eisenberg would have done him and the movie so many favors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Because when you look at that movie, other than like the Martha scene, you really
Mm-hmm.
don't think about anything that like Clark or Bruce is doing is bad. Like most of their scenes are good.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. Mm-hmm.
then the fight was great up until that moment. But yeah, I mean the writing and maybe even the casting. Nothing against Jesse Eisenberg because I think he's tremendous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's a great example of like how your villain could have enhanced your story, but instead it just absolutely tanked it.
Right. I remember when the trailer for that first came out. I stopped everything I was doing to watch that trailer for BVS, and that trailer had me. It had me in the palm of his hand. And we get the scene where like we see Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent like they're speaking to each other at the gala, and I love that. And then immediately I hear this fucking nasally ass voice, and I'm like, who the fuck is this? And I'm like, that's Lex. It's like, okay, well, this is. I don't know what this is right now. Yeah.
I remember seeing that trailer for the first time too.
Yeah.
Because I was in Hall H.
That's right.
And I was so excited.
Yeah.
I was so hyped. Damn it.
God.
But
damn it.
yeah, I mean that whole thing, like, and you even look at the sequel to that. You look at Justice League. One of the big differences, I mean, there's a lot of them, but one of the biggest items on that list is
Right.
like the complete rework of Steppenwolf.
Right.
Like he's just a fucking mustache twirling plot device in the in the Justice League.
Right.
And then you go to the Snyder cut and you're like, oh, this guy actually has a
He actually has a
backstory
plot,
and
yeah.
a plot, and you
Yeah.
kind of feel bad for him a little bit. I
Right.
mean,
Like if I do this, hey, can I come back home?
yeah.
Yeah. Whereas, you're right. In the Justice League, there was just none of that. I'm doing this because I like it and I'm evil and this, that, and the third. Didn't quite work out. And I mean, I do wish that superhero movies, more of them anyway, would realize the importance of how strong a villain. I mean, I look at it this way, right? Like, even if, and we're gonna talk about this very soon on the superhero homies, but like with the Dark Knight trilogy, all three of those movies have extremely strong antagonists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like that plays a large part of the success of those movies, and they give those antagonists a good bit of screen time to let them breathe and develop.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's like a big cornerstone of those, and like, I really wish that we had gotten
Riddler.
Yeah, Riddler.
Oh,
DiCaprio
man.
as Riddler, man.
Oh, that would have been something
In
else.
that universe, it would have been something else.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
'Cause that was their original plan. If Ledger hadn't died, is they were
really?
they were gonna do Leah. They were gonna do a DiCaprio Riddler, and they were gonna have a point where they like did the whole thing where Bane like breaks open Blackgate, but like the Joker was going to get out. And that was going to be like kind of the third act or whatever. Yeah.
Damn.
And that would have been fucking insane.
That sounds like it has potential to be one of the greatest superhero movies ever. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Whichever one of those Olsen twins. Fuck them.
Damn it, man.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the theory for The Dark Knight about the guy who worked for Wayne Tech, who pieced together that Bruce Wayne was Batman and brought it to Lucius. That he was actually the Riddler? You ever heard that theory?
I have heard that theory. Yeah. And I think that the reason that theory was brought up is because it was very similar to how Edward Nygma was played in Forever. Kind of the backstory for him.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And also the cleverness of that guy to put all that together.
Right.
And he also had he was also a ginger, you know.
Yeah.
And also the way that the dialogue was written specifically for for Lucius, he would always call him Mr. Reese, which sounds like mysteries. You know? And so people were really hounding on that.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
Yeah. They Mephisto'd themselves.
They did. They Mephisto'd themselves. Nolan was like, I'm gonna write Inception here. I didn't even think of that shit.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I think that about wraps this up. This has been a blast, dude.
This has been amazing.
I've been looking forward to this for like 20 weeks.
Yeah.
That wraps up season 6, folks.
Oh man.
We are taking a break. 24 episodes in season 6. We had multiple weeks where there was that one week where I recorded like 6 fucking podcast episodes.
Like every day you were podcasting.
It was insane. Yeah. So we're going to take a little hiatus here, probably about maybe like 4 weeks, about a month. I am going to Universal the first weekend of June. So I don't know if I'll be back before then or maybe right after then. Maybe it'll be right after. We'll see. But we'll definitely be back. And if you want to hear my voice, you definitely can go over to Superhero Homies. We are going to be covering this right here, none of the White Sand. We're going to be covering each movie in the Dark Knight trilogy. We're going to be doing the Guardians of the Galaxy review. And then pretty much anything else that we could possibly think of. We're going to be at MomoCon at the end of May, and we're going to be promoting the podcast there along with Oz from the Tavern Notice Board. And, you know, for kicks, I might just have to pop over there and, you know, ruin one of his episodes. So
that'd be fun.
Yeah, I think so. But when we come back, our very first episode back, we are going to be ranking the entire Cosmere book by book. That is going to be the first episode in season 7. That is already set. So I already have an incredible return planned. So that being said, thank you for joining me for this. This has been amazing.
Thank you for having me, man. This has been so much fun to do. I've been looking forward to this ever since we did the Protagonist episode.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was so fun. I know that you love these deep character dives, and I do too. So that is season 6, ladies and gentlemen. And this has been Entertainment Evolved. We will catch you in like a month.